All right, let's talk about what really matters. When it comes down to really understanding how to be about your life, you need to understand that to rebuild yourself, you have to know thyself. And it's a simple concept. It starts with being able to understand your birthday. All right, when you go ahead and take a look at your birthday, you'll be able to acquire certain information that gives you a certain value at the point of insertion. What I mean by that is this, that if you add up all the numbers from the month, the day, and the year, you'll be able to acquire a certain number between 1 to, I believe, 22. Now, it'll be either a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6, a 7, an 8, or a 9. Some people are actually going to go ahead and get master number 11 or master number 22. If you're one of those, you could go ahead and add them up and do either 2 or 4, but understand these. Each number has its specific life path. Once you understand the life path, you can start doing some research on that life path to help you understand what it is that you're here to do, how others have done it, and what others are doing. This should also give you clarity on what you're not here to do. This is important because a lot of the times people seem to forget that in this journey, others are better for certain tasks than yourself. And so, what I would recommend that you do is that by being able to be aware of your karmic energy or your karmic path, you would be able to now think for a second and try to add up the numbers of everybody that you have around you and figure out who's what number. And then ask yourself, what kind of relationship you have with them? Because most of the time, if there's somebody that has the same number as you, you'll resonate with them. And if there's somebody that has a number that really just balances you out, let's say, and by balance, I mean to always get you to 9. 9 is the ideal number. And if you are a 9, then obviously you are someone that is here with a social consciousness. And this is what it means, global consciousness. I think most of us are constantly trying to get to the number 9 so that we could be globally aware. And if you are globally aware or socially aware, then that means that you are an empath, or you are somebody that's being aware of how the world is being corrupted in one way or another, and you're willing to sacrifice in order to go ahead and see the betterment of the situation. And that's great. Now, if you are that individual, obviously now you could try to surround yourself with individuals who you are not, such as 1s, 2s, 3s, and so on. The idea here is that your point of entry or your birth date also tells us a few things about you. It tells us that you're not perfect. Just like you see with this pyramid here, it's an imperfect pyramid, because the truth of the matter is that you were probably a child that was in the womb for 9 months. 9 out of 12 months of the year. This means that your mother was feeding you minerals and salts and energy for 9 out of the 12 months. So what you want to think about is that once you are born, you are always in pursuit of perfection. And this pursuit of perfection happens when you acquire, or you are able to come into enlightenment of the information that allows you to satisfy what has been missing due to the imperfection of creation. Most people don't realize the simplicity in the salvation concept, but I want to share with you that salvation is found through the salts that you acquire in your day-to-day activities or in your 24-hour clock. Consumption is part of the gestation period. And what you need to understand is that if we are going to consume food, there is going to be a digestion period of 36 hours from mouth to tail so that we can excrete that food that we just ate and be ready for the next meal. Now, this means that when you consume food, your body's going to, once again, you can chew it and you got to break it down, and then it's got to be passed through your entire body as it extracts the value out of the food. Now, there is value to be pulled out at different parts of the digestive system, and we're going to talk about those things down the road. What you want to understand here is that because your mom, as she was feeding you while you were in the womb, certain nutrients were being passed specifically from her. And so going back to these birth deficiencies that can be solved through salts, we need to think about what might be your specific deficiencies. And it's quite simple. If you reverse engineer what date you were born, you'll understand what 3 months were missing from your development. And then each month of the year actually has its own specific salt attached to it. And I'll elaborate more on this as we go on in the course. But each month has its own specific salt, just like each passage of time has its own specific zodiac sign attached to it. And so you need to understand that each one of us was created perfectly for a reason, but we are also perfectly imperfect so that you can have purpose. Now, in this purpose or the pursuit of knowledge that allows you to become your best self, you are constantly on your toes. And it is your duty to surround yourselves with individuals that have found habits of good health, so that way you could become better, unlock your potential, and help others unlock their value. And that's what I'm here to do today. As we go on through this conversation, I want you to keep in mind a few things. The human body, when it's working efficiently, will radiate all 12 chakras with symbiotic energy, meaning it'll work efficiently just like you see here. Because from the first root chakra to the very top crown chakra, we have to understand that the body only works efficiently or energetically or in a state of high vibration if the adrenals or the glands in the body are working efficiently. And so this all goes back to the idea that as man is created imperfect, man has also always lacked the human manual to give us the ability so that we could follow step by step with clarity as to how to overcome life's deficiencies that we were given from birth. It's just a matter of luck, right? You don't know who your parents are going to be, and you don't know what your deficiencies are going to be, and you don't know what your future is going to be. So now, if you're in a place of wondering, why is it that I'm not able to see myself seeing my best health? Why am I suffering from poor health? You got to really ponder on one thing. Did the moment of my birth have anything to do with this? Why was I chosen to come into this plane at this time? Well, the way I like to think of it is the moment you enter the matrix, your birth date, you are given a specific responsibility. You're given a mission. You have certain contracts. I'll elaborate on all of this as we go along. But you are also given a certain hand of cards, let's say. And these cards that you are dealt with would either be what your parents know about the human body before you were even born, what your parents ate before they were born, how your parents managed their finances, how your parents' mental health was. All these things, from mental health to finances to what their DNA frequency was, all these things matter. And the moment you are born, a new set of circumstances are born. So not only are you then deficient at a certain point, but then now you have certain programming, right? Because it's deficiencies in programming or coding or certain behaviors that we become victims to. And your parents are the first to start teaching you a certain way of behaving, whether that is rewarded or punished. And so you've got to think of yourself as a machine that has been punished or rewarded to behave in certain ways. Now, after hearing a little bit more about certain individuals, I can understand if certain traumas arise at birth, we will definitely see ourselves as less than or deficient in certain ways compared to others. I'm not discussing that subject right now because the truth of the matter is we are all deficient from the moment we are born. We are deficient in knowing what salts the body needs to operate at the cellular level. You see, at the cellular level, you've got to think, what am I needing to feed my cells to keep them strong? And so when we think about deficiencies, we want to go ahead and now look at cellular health and DNA health. Because cells need to have periods of autophagy And this is a concept that we need to understand. But when we are born, autophagy is not needed. We actually need to go ahead and trigger certain metabolisms. All right, and this metabolism is actually to grow. Sometimes we need to heal. And when it's time to heal, we want to turn on autophagy. Certain times we want our tissue to grow, we want our cells to replicate, so then we want to turn on our metabolism so that it could grow. And learning how to turn on these levers or these switches will allow you to optimize your body's performance or to synchronize your actions, your emotions, and your moods. This is really important because when you can synchronize all three, then you become one. And acting in unison is ultimately the goal. So, once again, our metabolism is triggered by a certain set of actions. This could be food or this could be light. Either or is going to cause a certain specific reaction. What do I mean? Well, when light hits the forehead, it causes the pineal gland to start releasing certain amounts of hormones, serotonin, so that we can switch our body from sleep mode, which is created because of melatonin, and so now we switch with serotonin. What most seem to forget though is that serotonin is not only produced here at the moment that light impacts the forehead and it transfers through into the pineal gland, but serotonin is actually produced in the stomach. This is what creates the gut-brain axis. Most individuals who are unaware of the gut-brain axis will fall victim to being bloated and feeling like shit because they don't understand that if you are bloated, this is a clear sign of your stomach not being able to process food correctly due to a few different ailments that we'll discuss shortly. However, if your stomach is bloated, this is a clear sign that you are not getting the most out of your food, and your body won't be able to create the hormones necessary to communicate from the gut to the brain to explain from the gut to the brain that the body is satisfied or that we've had enough. On the contrary, it'll actually cause you to feel like you haven't eaten enough. Sometimes when there's a leaky gut, it'll allow nutrients or food or toxins that enter the gut to permeate into the bloodstream, causing us to feel discomfort, joint pain, arthritis, and so on. All these different things that you're currently listening to me speak about are due to a few issues, but it all begins with how you understand your current metabolism. The idea of consumption of food is actually the action, not the idea, the action of consumption of food is actually what triggers certain metabolisms. Now, that's not to say, just like you've heard in the past, that when you start kind of thinking of a food, you start watering your mouth. That's not to say that you can't trigger it with your mind, because you can. The mind is very strong. And this is why we got to talk about what actually controls our metabolism. And that's actually your brain. Beyond your actions, right? Because if you go ahead and have food, you're going to cause your body to go into a certain metabolism. And that metabolism is called the growing metabolism. It's caused by food, and it's caused by stress. So if we destroy our body with working out and moving around and lifting heavy weights, we will destroy the fibers in our muscles, which then, if you consume food, your body will recognize as well, there's a place that was torn up or ripped apart, so I'm going to eat and replace those nutrients into that specific part. Now, when you do not work out and you just consume food, you cause your body to obviously have to choose what to do with that food. If you eat a certain type of food, it will utilize it, and if you if you consume a different type of food, then it'll store it. So there's a bunch of levers that we need to understand about the body and how it works. But before I get into food, we need to understand that light and food both trigger certain states within the body. Now, the brain is like an antenna, and it channels different receptions or different, you can pick up different signals. And so this is why we say when you got to know thyself, you need to understand beta, alpha, theta, and delta. These are not just fraternities. These are actually brain states. And when you understand that your brain is actually cycling through all of these states throughout the day, depending on what actions you're performing, then you understand why it is easy to manipulate certain people who are in a certain submissive state versus others who are more in a aggressive state or in a more competitive state. Everybody can be multiple people based upon the brain state that they're in. If you speak to somebody when they're coming out of sleep, they're going to be a completely different person than when they're midday. Now, this does not mean that the person is not the same person. However, the way that their brain is sending signals to the body is different. Sometimes the signal is slower, so it's bigger. Sometimes it's faster, so it's smaller, and it just goes like this. And so that's what's really going to cause the difference in how much voltage is being required of the body, or how much information is being asked of the body, as well as how much energy or how much voltage the body can access based upon its state. Most people don't seem to realize that the brain state determines the genetic abilities, as well as the brain state determines the energy of the body. So I need you to think about this, because for the next few weeks, if you really want to be somebody that takes control of their health, you need to prioritize moments of shifting your brain state so that you can have complete control over how your body feels. Most individuals will not manually shift their brain states, causing them to become victims of their brain state because the environment dictates their brain state. You actually want to be the individual that dictates your brain state, whether that is through consumption of caffeine, consumption of food, meditation, hydration. Preparation is always the key. And if you understand that today is going to demand a certain character or a certain level of performance from you, then you can prepare for that. But let's speak individually to somebody who was born, let's say like my dad, in July, a Cancer, right? And they have certain deficiencies in their life, because not only was this individual born in, let's say, in July, and this individual, let's say my dad doesn't know about his beta, alpha, theta, delta, so then he's going to be left to believe that he's not in good health because he's not necessarily eating his best. But what if he switches over to eating healthy, like bananas, smoothies, sandwiches of chicken salads and salmon and vegetables and all these things? What's going to happen then? He's eating clean. Then what? Well, I want you to remember that there's an extra layer beyond eating clean. And it just so happens to be that my dad, being a Cancer, happens to have one of the most important situations that we can think about. Because as I mentioned, nobody's created perfect. So if an individual born in July, right, they missed out on 3 months of the year in their birth development. This means that they are missing 3 key salts. Now, I'm going to give you 2, and I want you to do your own research on the 3rd, all right? But here's where it's going to be. Magnesium and potassium sulfate. These are the 2 salts that I'm going to go ahead and give you. Once again, I'm going to let you do the research on one more that will ultimately improve your cellular health. Now, that's not to say that other cell salts won't help, because cell salts are important for your health. Like, they're very, very important. You got to think at the cellular level, am I working well, before thinking at the unit, at the full body realm, right? Because this is your 3rd density suit. But as a cell, how is your body moving? What is the frequency? What is their interaction? What is the voltage, right? And so we want to think, number 1, in order to solve these deficiencies, we need to do magnesium. We need to do our potassium sulfate, and we need to have our cellular salts. This is going to be to prepare your body to have what it needs. Then you want to think, all right, now I have what I wanted. Now throughout the day, I'm going to stay hydrated with electrolytes, because electrolytes is what's going to keep your body running smooth. And so what you want to think about is, to make sure you're good, always think magnesium. Magnesium is going to be the key. And the reason is, since you're born, we're going to speak from cradle to grave. From the moment you are born, your body has a certain level of magnesium. It's a good amount of magnesium, actually. The most you're probably going to have unless you do something about it. And so what tends to happen is that as we get older and older, the amount of magnesium decreases. And so what tends to happen is magnesium is also the molecule of motion. So if we lose magnesium, we lose our ability to be mobile. This means your flexibility, elasticity, all that depends on your magnesium. What tends to happen, because of certain regulations that were passed by the FDA in 1941 and in the 1970s, we have been seeing an enrichment of food that actually occurs, through our lifetime. And every year, the more that food that you eat, the more iron you consume. You see, iron is going to go ahead and cause you to have more metals in your body. So the more food you eat, let's say that this is 10, now you're 20, now you're 30, now you're entering your 40s, and you notice that there's a crossing between your 30s and your 40s. Now this means that the amount of metals in your body is currently about to be higher, right, on this end. It's about to be higher than the amount of magnesium that you have available in your body. Now, magnesium has one role, and that's to help the body with stress. That's really good for stress, and it's also an essential key of creating ATP. But really quick, the body gives up magnesium every time that you put yourself under emotional, physical, environmental, or metabolic. So if you are suffering from emotional stress, physical stress, environmental stress, or metabolic deficiencies, your body is currently getting beat up. It's like if it's in a fight and it's currently losing because the more stress, the more emotions, the more physical wearing down, the more magnesium your body loses. And so what tends to happen is that because we are losing magnesium, our body does not feel able to then provide enough nutrients to the cell. Then what happens is, because we never detoxified our body, right, we have to remove toxins, remove metals. We have to remove the metals in order for our body to be able to then understand how to run without having an excess of iron, because it wasn't meant to have an excess of iron. It was just meant to have certain amounts of iron, not an excess. Now, what tends to happen is that when there's too much iron in the body, what we begin to see is that, by the way, I should erase this. So if you can understand how, because of eating habits and the way that our food has been enriched in America, maybe in the rest of the world is a little bit different, but in America we have an increase of iron in our food, and this causes us to then be able to become victims of one of two things. And all because of how our body reacts to stress, and because if there's any stress, our body panics. Now, when there's stress, there's a loss of magnesium. And I'm going to make sure that you remember that. So, stress equals loss of magnesium. And this is key because as we go on, you want to keep in mind that if there is a loss of magnesium, then this causes iron to become abundant in the body, right? It's an overwhelming amount of iron. So we have A, loss of magnesium, and then B, we have iron toxicity. Both of these are causes of big issues because when there's too much iron in the body, iron and copper both compete for oxygen. And if our body does not have the necessary amount of magnesium, then it doesn't know how to tell calcium where to go. And if calcium doesn't know where to go, then it can't do its job in order to go ahead and help the iron be able to take oxygen. And so now we have this whole big mess. And at the end of the mess, what's really taking the hit is the liver. Because now the liver has to play a role in how it's handling all of this stress, because it is the one that's suffering from the metals and because of the high fructose corn syrup and the GMOs. Because remember, in the 80s and the 90s, we had these two things added into our lifestyle. So our liver is going through a lot. Now, what we want to think about is that you have 24 hours to put magnesium into your body so that you can keep your mobility. But there are 9 different types of magnesium. 9 different types of magnesium. Only one can cross the brain. See how this number 9 is amazingly like the spine? This is the brain and this is the spine. Only one, threonate, magnesium threonate is the only one that can cross the blood-brain barrier, bringing energy, mobility, and oxygen into the brain. This is by far one of the best minerals that we could bring into our body. And magnesium is the only one that could be supplemented directly. Everything else we kind of want to stay away from, and we're going to do things with food, and that way we could keep our body naturally just learning to adapt to food sources again. The most important thing is to understand the relationship to magnesium, and I will make sure that you have links below so that you can watch the lectures that you need to watch in order to understand the information that I'm discussing right now. But understand that the levels of stress that you're currently taking are going to affect the way that your body becomes a director or an orchestrator of what to do with the calcium in your body. But because your body doesn't know what to do with the calcium, it can't do its next job because iron is too much in the body. And so now there's a fight between, who's going to get the oxygen, copper or iron. And if there's too much iron in the body and not enough copper in the body, then what tends to happen is the body cannot do what it needs to do, because copper is the guy that will help the body regulate zinc and iron distribution to the rest of the body so that iron can do its job and become and do what it's meant to do, which is to oxidize things correctly, because copper is the one that actually tells the body what to oxidize. So if iron is getting more oxygen than copper, obviously copper can't do its job. Copper wants to simply combine with ceruloplasmin, an enzyme created by the liver if things are done correctly. Copper and ceruloplasmin together in conjunction with magnesium will be able to regulate our blood so that we could take oxygen to exactly where it needs to go, and hemoglobin could attach to iron so that way it could do what it needs to do. This entire relationship needs to happen, but most of us do not understand that salts are the key to our body. Most of us think that only proteins, carbs, and fats are important. But the truth is, protein, carbs, and fats together are good and they will create what's called ATP. But unless you have ATP plus magnesium, your ATP does not become utilizable energy. And this is where most people do not realize that magnesium has such an important part to the body and that you can supplement it directly without any issues. But most of us always believe that the issue isn't not sleeping enough or not eating enough. So beyond looking at things from a bigger perspective, right, we need to understand what is the problem at the cellular level, because we do not want to ignite autophagy unless we have put magnesium back into the body, so that when the cells are working without calories, but they are working with minerals, they are working efficiently. Now, you have to understand what is called your maximum heart rate, because your maximum heart rate determines what metabolism or what source of energy your body will be running off of. So let's do this. 220 minus your age. That means this minus 39. Let's say that you are 39 and that becomes what? This is a 1, this becomes a 1, and a 1, and this becomes a 1, there's a 1, boom, and that's 11, so that means that this is an 8, right? 8, 181. So if 181 is your maximum heart rate, then we got to figure out what is your 80% from that in order to be able to determine at which heart rate does your body shift into a carbohydrate sourced metabolism for energy versus under which metabolism. If you are operating below 80%, your body will go ahead and use oxygen that you breathe in plus the fats that you've consumed in order to create energy. Now, this is the problem. Most individuals who consume carbohydrates, they do not train at a high intensity, so their body is in an acidic state simply because it is trying to process the carbohydrates. If you're somebody that doesn't work out, ideally you want to be focusing on a lifestyle that focuses on fats and movements that allow you to breathe without feeling like you're being held back from consumption of air. What I mean by is that if you ever feel like you're taking short breaths, this means that your heart rate is elevating, causing you to have to shift into a carbohydrate metabolism. We don't want our body to be running off of carbohydrates all the time, because that will cause our body to grow abnormally or at an abnormal rate. Carbohydrates will spike what is called the mTOR genes in our cells, and they will cause us to go ahead and start trying to grow our cellular tissue. Now, this is something that you want to be very careful with, because once again, when you start this process of growing, which is called mTOR, you ask the body to, it's called cell growth. Well, the way I like to look at cell growth, just like the way I like to look at eating, is cell growth and eating and basically like your body is having a party inside of it, right? If you eat, it's a party. But once you stop eating, somebody has to do the cleanup. That's called autophagy. That's cleanup. Now, most people hate cleaning their room, let alone, they kind of know what they're doing there. Not a lot of people really know about autophagy. The fact that a lot of people don't know about autophagy leads us to see this incredible amount of people gaining weight and becoming unhealthy simply because their cellular structure has never had the chance to take a break. All they've ever learned is how to eat and eat and eat. And so what we want to think about is we need to learn how to kind of play with these levers that let our metabolism either rest or grow, heal or tear. And so as we're doing these things, our body can then be repaired by our own actions. Hence, rebuild yourself. As we keep going, you'll notice that your cellular health is going to require not just the cell salts or this magnesium that I was talking about, but you also need to start thinking about how to pull metals out of your body. To pull metals out of your body, you need what's called a chelator. The keys in finding salvation are removing the metals that are being placed in your body. Once again, this iron toxicity, we need to start pulling certain metals out of our body and increasing the amount of salts that we give our body, as well as the amount of B12 that we give our body. And in doing so, not only will we be able to go ahead and increase the electrical amplitude of our entire infrastructure, but you will also give the cells the fuel that they need in order to allow the mitochondria to be able to create ATP on demand. You see, vitamin B12 is what the mitochondria needs at the cellular level in order to create energy. Most individuals don't realize that this could actually be acquired from a simple nutritional yeast source, which will give them more than 5 times the daily need. So if you purchase some nutritional yeast, you'll be able to acquire the vitamin B12 that I'm talking about. And then all you need now is to do your specific karmic path number to understand the salts that have been missing from your body from birth. If you understand what I'm speaking about here, then you can move on to do the next thing, which is to focus on removing free radicals in order to improve how your cells perform. You see, every time that you consume carbs, there's going to be a waste product. A waste product. And this waste is called free radicals. And these radicals, these free radicals, are actually what lead to cancer in conjunction with sustained mTOR activation. So when people say that they are going through a period of cancer or disease, they're essentially saying one of two things. If you have disease, that means that your body is not transporting oxygen with ease. And if you have cancer, then that means that your body is under attack by a surplus or an accumulation of free radicals because of a sustained mTOR gene activation because of constant consumption of food at various times of the day. So now that you are understanding a little bit more about how your cells can take a beating because of free radicals, which come from carbohydrate consumption. Remember, when you eat carbohydrates, your body will create free radicals. And unless you neutralize these free radicals, meaning that you balance them out, these free radicals can continue to accumulate, at which point will eventually lead, along with a combined sustained mTOR activation, free radicals, sustained mTOR activation will cause an abnormal replication of cells, which is called cancer, because now these cells, they're not replicating correctly. That means that the body is not reading the protein instructions correctly to be able to duplicate itself. So because we understand that carbohydrates, which by the way, these are the king's food, right? The food of the wealthy. Carbohydrates like bread and glucose and all these different types of wheat, these are foods of the wealthy. These foods, although they are delicious, they do have a waste product that most of us never give a second thought to, and they're called free radicals. These free radicals actually will go ahead and attack your DNA. And you see, your DNA is the one that's responsible, as well as your RNA. DNA and RNA, they're the ones that are responsible for your ability to duplicate cells. And so if your DNA is being unwinded or uncoiled, this means that it's separating. The telomeres are no longer protecting it. This means that you lost the ability to basically keep duplicating good cells, all because of this. And so we really want to go ahead and cells is what we need. Switch is what tells these. And so remember, we want to make sure our DNA and RNA are both healthy. And so in order to do that, we have to constantly think, am I putting my body through situations or experiences or demands that allow it to activate what is called sirtuins. Sirtuins, this is gonna improve the health of your telomeres. And your telomeres are just like the end cap of this pen. See this pen here? It's called DNA strand. The end cap here is called a telomere. And when you put it on top of each other, now it can communicate with other DNA strands without any problem. But if I try to go ahead and put this pen without the cap into this, it's going to damage the pen or the DNA. Well, the same happens when your body goes through long chronic amounts of time without magnesium and without activation of sirtuins. So let me bring it a little bit more attention to it. Let me go ahead and highlight it right here. Sirtuins are actually what's going to help you maintain your DNA telomere health. Now, when you do that, then you got to realize that this all is determined by the way that your body is being stimulated to create certain hormones. So the circadian rhythm is what you're looking to ask yourself. Is my body running synchronized to the circadian rhythm? That's the next question. Because if you know that you are somebody that is under a lot of stress, that you have some kind of iron toxicity, or you have a loss of magnesium, either or, this is going to lead you to then have to wonder, am I having too many metals in my body because all I've ever asked my body to do was to grow, because all I've really done was eat. I've never taken a break longer than maybe 4 to 5 hours other than when I sleep. And if you're somebody who does maybe like 10 hours, that's still not enough time. You want to think of at least 24 to 48 hours if you've never done it before. You want to start thinking, okay, my first mental training fortitude step, you know, if you're ever going to train your brain, you have to train yourself to go 24 hours without eating. If you succeed, reward yourself by eating a salad that has, once again, vegetables, nuts, antioxidants, blueberries, these fruits, things that are going to help you fight free radicals, because that's what antioxidants do. They help you fight free radicals. They neutralize them, and this is the key, right? So in order to fight free radicals, you need to have antioxidants. Most people don't realize that antioxidants are the key to negating the effects of carbohydrates. So if you're somebody who's overweight and you're wondering, how can I stop my body from suffering or hurting? Well, you could eat some blueberries, but the strongest antioxidant that I know of is called Shilajit. Shilajit. This right here is going to be what you need in order to help your body combat the excess amount of free radicals. Because if you are somebody who has been eating carbohydrates for a long period of time, and you're looking to stop eating carbohydrates in such a high amount, but you're looking to negate the effects of previous years of carbohydrate consumption, then what I would do is I would switch to a ketogenic diet, meaning a fat-driven diet, and on the period of time that I'm not consuming food, let's say that you're doing intermittent fasting, you could do intermittent fasting, and then when you start eating, you would start eating only ketogenic meals, meaning high in fiber, high in fats, low in carbohydrates so that we don't spike up our sugar level, but not with the idea that we're doing it because of diabetes, but we are doing it because we are not working out at high intensities. So there is no need to bring carbohydrates into your body. On the contrary, you can even drop the amount of calories that you consume because your machine will be running more efficiently on fats, as well as you will be able to also negate the accumulation of free radical accumulation, because when you consume carbohydrates, the byproduct or the waste product is free radicals. So now, say that you stop creating more and you just fight to remove whatever you have inside. That's why Shilajit is key. You know, it's one of the best chelators as well. And so we want to go ahead and then start thinking to ourselves that if we can start seeing the solution here, because a healthy body that is free of disease means that it is able to have sufficient magnesium so that the magnesium could tell the calcium what to do. Because if the calcium could do what it does, then the copper could do what it does. And then if the copper does what it does, then the iron can go ahead and do what it needs to do. So if this is all running smooth, the liver can feel good, it can have a healthy chemistry where it's creating the necessary enzymes. Because remember, enzymes are what causes things to get broken down. Enzymes are what help you break down every protein, carb, or fat that you consume. And so if these enzymes are not being produced correctly because the liver is maybe overwhelmed with metals, or maybe there's too much high fructose corn syrup, or maybe there's an overconsumption of GMOs, well then the liver will not be able to produce the necessary enzymes, at which point you probably have what's called a fatty liver, and then we would have to do a different protocol for that. But someone who is becoming aware of the impact of carbohydrates in their lifestyle and is not overweight would simply have to learn about implementing Shilajit as a good way to kind of combat the free radicals, as well as they would have to learn how to start taking bigger windows of digestion in order to start triggering this protocol called autophagy within the cell metabolism. And so the cell metabolism will allow us to then help the DNA, because if we could focus on lining up our body back to its circadian rhythm, then the body can create the hormones that it needs, because it will have the fluidity, or it'll be synchronized to the sunlight. And that's the most important thing you want to keep in mind, that our body runs in sync to the moon and the sun, and that's called the circadian rhythm. For those individuals that have never really learned about astrology or how the sun impacts our body, I just want you to think about this. The reason that we have agriculture is because we have studied the sun and its patterns for many years. And so the seasons are determined by the sun's position. So if the seasons determine our food growth periods, then that means that the moon should also have a significant role, right? So the moon determines your hormones, the sun determines the food. Together they create what's called the circadian rhythm. And if you are in a symbiotic relationship, or if you are in sync with your circadian rhythm, that means that you will create a certain hormone at a certain time of the day, giving you a certain type of energy level or a ability to, or responsibility, so that each organ can function as it needs to in order to keep your homeostasis, right? We want to keep homeostasis at all costs. So with that being said, you need to understand that sometimes when you're over 40, your body has lost so much magnesium that maybe your liver can't create the same amount of digestive enzymes. So in order to help your body, you might have to start thinking, okay, I'm healthy, I'm going to take some digestive enzymes to help my liver so that my liver can focus on getting all the metals out of my body. But then with my actions, I'm going to not let myself bring in any more GMOs or high fruit corn syrup or high fructose corn syrup. We want to remove these things out of our life so that we don't even have to put our liver through the effort of removing them. Okay? Let me check on the camera real quick. Once again, all of this is all meant so that we can create an alkaline environment so that our body can maintain good cellular health. Once again, an alkaline environment is all dependent upon the organ, but cells, when they work together, they create organs. And when these cells that work together create these organs, well, all of these organs, they're being synchronized by the DNA and the RNA and how they trigger our body to go into either what's called mTOR, which I've talked about over here, or HEAL, which is called AMPK. These are the two metabolisms that our body can go through. You're either going to go ahead and be in mTOR or AMPK. Now the idea here is this. Most individuals, as they go through life, they choose to put themselves under mTOR. But the idea is that if you are sick, if you're a senior, or you're someone dealing with cancer or an ailment, you must switch to AMPK. The idea would be, the ideal thing would be that you can find balance between the two before you get sick. But if you are sick, if you are deficient, or you're currently going through a situation that's currently driving you insane, the reason it's probably because you have been overwhelming your mTOR, which essentially leads you to overwhelm adrenal fatigue, and adrenal fatigue